Yeah, also a good question. I have a very eclectic background. As you might have picked up from my LinkedIn, I've worked in a lot of different sectors. So I wouldn't say I'm pretty sector agnostic. I think more recently it's been very focused on startups, SMEs, purpose-led businesses. But I have worked with clients in much larger businesses or public and public sector clients. I'd say it's probably more about the person. They're probably
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host Rexhen, and today's guest is Maddie Fox, a seasoned HR leader, executive coach, and founder of MadFox Group, where she brings over 20 years of global experience to the intersection of leadership, people strategy, and organizational transformation. As a fractional chief people officer and an ICF-accredited coach, Maddie partners with fast-scaling startups, global enterprises, and purpose-driven organizations to help them navigate complex change, build high-performing teams, and develop leaders who lead with purpose and empathy. Her work blends deep expertise in HR strategy with a human-centered coaching approach, empowering leaders to drive impact while staying true to themselves and their people. And it's a pleasure for me to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Maddie.
Thank you very much, Rexhen. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming, Maddie. It's great to have you on. I wanted to ask you, first of all, when it comes to your beginnings and how you got started as a coach, first of all, what sparked that? What inspired you to become a coach and then do it as a business?
Yeah, good question. So I think there were a couple of points quite early on in my career. I did not do particularly well at school, and I left school at 18. And whilst we were freaking out as a family as to what was going to happen, what was I going to do next, I got a Christmas job in an electrical retailer here in the UK. And I really didn't think I'd stay there very long. I thought it would be a little bit of money over Christmas and I'd work out what I was going to do with my life. And as it happened, they opened a computer retailer in the town that I was in, and I got a full-time job there and actually kind of excelled quite quickly, within the role, and ended up managing a team there. But the point about that role, there's two things really. The first one was the manager I had in that first sort of phase in the computer retailer. He always asked me questions. So if I would go into his office, I was very young. I was 21. I was managing a team of 15 people, probably a lot of emotions still flying around. And I would go storming into his office and what was I going to do about this? And it was a customer service team too, right? So I had people shouting at me all day long. And he would always say, what do you want to do about it? And it would always take the wind out of my sails. I was like, oh, I get to choose. Right. Okay. Right. Well, this is what I want to do. And then he would support me. I share that now as a reflection because now I know what that was coaching. Mm-hmm. At the time, of course, I just thought, oh, this is kind of cool. I get to make my own choices here. And then the second piece in that organization, I was sent along with all the leaders. So each business, each kind of retail outlet had 9 or 10 leaders in it. We were all sent on a 3-day leadership program as part of a big cultural change program for the organization. And I was captivated. There were 60 of us in the room. The facilitator who ran that, I was just like, wow, that is so cool. He's kept all of our attention for 3 days. I could see transformation happening in people in the room. And we call some of the things different now, but they're still present in leadership. And the one that was most impactful on people was this expression they used called be here now. Mm-hmm. And when people started to realize that actually by being distracted at work, they were missing out on having a real conversation, or they maybe were doing that at home with their families. And I could see this was bringing up a lot of emotion for people. And so I guess that was the first time I started to really see transformation at work. And I would say that probably the third piece in my sort of earlier career, I was working in Australia at the time for a big financial services company. And we commissioned a piece of work with a coach called, in fact, I've got the book here, so I remembered his name, Anthony Grant. And he had a coaching course at Sydney University. I think it might have been one of the first of its kind at a university. I'm talking quite a while ago now, nearly 20 years ago. And we brought him and his team in to work with all the leaders. They used the model Grow. They did lots of other things in that. That was one of the sessions I remember. And as part of the L&D team, I got to be part of that. Well, actually, I was an HR consultant at the time. I was an HR business partner. But because it was with, a lot of my client groups, I was able to go and attend some of this. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I could see the managers then using that. The other thing that gave me was, I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing in my job. So I think that really early seed that had been planted from that manager, I had taken that approach. And as an HR business partner, they're not your decisions to make. You're supporting managers to do what they need to do in the business. And so I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. It's called coaching. So I think that's a long-winded answer to your question, but that certainly that first seed was, I want to be that facilitator. That's what I want to do. But I'm 21. Nobody's going to take me seriously. I surely need to be at least 40 and, let me go off and get some experience. And so that was always in my mind. I wanted to do that. And somehow I knew I wanted to do that for myself. Yeah. And that that stayed with me for the nearly next 20 years as I went off and had a career.
So when exactly you decided to do like the ICF accreditation? Was that after you started coaching or was it before? Did you feel like
Yeah, it was after I started coaching. And actually I had some challenges with it originally, but so I had a role, the last role I had in corporate life before I set up by myself. I worked in the Lloyd's insurance market in London, and I had an OD role. I worked for a wonderful woman, Nora Ovenden, who knew we had quite a small team. There wasn't a whole lot of progression there, and she was really invested in helping me develop the skills I needed to, knowing that ultimately I wanted to go and be an independent consultant. So I did my training, I did my coaching qualification when I was there. I did a lot of coaching hours in-house. So I had the opportunity to, it's kind of a safe environment in a way, right? Because it gives you that space to sort of really practice and learn a bit about who you are as a coach. And, I had other components of my job as well. So when I left there, I was like, I probably should do my ICF. I'd spent a lot of time in my job previously procuring coaches. So I interviewed coaches a lot. And one of the things, particularly in the financial services sector, is, we wanted to know that they had training, that they had supervision, that they had credentials, so whether it was ICF or something else. And I think that's one of the things that my manager really taught me there, was about how do you kind of make sure someone has rigor in their practice. And I took that to heart in terms of how I had my own practice.
And so right now, after a few years of actually doing this, when working with a client, going through the coaching journey with them, is there a certain is there something about it that you find most rewarding? Going through the coaching journey with a client?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I find the whole thing incredibly rewarding, and what a privilege to have this little window into someone's life and be a part of something that may lead to change for them. It could be a small change that has significant impact. It could be a big change. And is never to forget that you are just a small window in their life. I think I'm always surprised too that often the moment where they're sort of like, oh, wow, that's it. Or, oh yeah, that's really significant for me. You've barely asked anything. You might have even said, and that is, or what, or repeated back a word that they just said. There's something in that moment where, it's that connection, it's that space, it's the time that you've given them to explore that allows that aha moment, if you like.
Absolutely. When working with your clients right now, specifically for the clients that are listening, potential clients, How would you describe the ideal client profile that you work with? Is there a certain demographic, certain industry, certain common goals that they have? How would you describe the ideal client profile?
Yeah, also a good question. I have a very eclectic background. As you might have picked up from my LinkedIn, I've worked in a lot of different sectors. So I wouldn't say I'm pretty sector agnostic. I think more recently it's been very focused on startups, SMEs, purpose-led businesses. But I have worked with clients in much larger businesses or public sector clients. I'd say it's probably more about the person. They're probably a leader, maybe a leader who's sort of taking that next step to be manager of managers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of transition there. I think there are, for leaders, there's some really sort of key pivotal moments, and I think I would come in at all of them. One is that first time of being a manager and having your first team or your first employees. That's a really big shift. How do you shift from being that individual contributor to, oh, now I need to get the best out of my team? Then the next big change, I would say, is that manager of managers, and that requires you to take much more of a step back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say sort of in the startup world, the SME world, often those leaders that I'm coaching are part of a leadership team or an exec team who are reporting into a founder or a CEO, and also some founders and CEOs too. And that also impacts, that's my one-on-one work, but it also impacts my teamwork as well, is working with those teams to support their dynamics.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maddie. Thank you for breaking that down. And for all of the leaders listening, when it comes to the engagement that they would have with you, how does that look like? Is there a certain program of a certain length? Is the program like fully customized to what their needs are, their goals are? How would you describe the engagement with you?
Yeah. I think given the time I grew up in the coaching world, there was a very sort of structured, it's 6 sessions, they're an hour and a half each session. That still seems to exist a little bit in the coaching world. And I would say I tend to try and be a little bit more flexible about that. I think there are a couple of things that are important. One is behavioral change tends to take place in a 9 to 12 month period. It doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to ensure that the engagement either supports that over that period of time, or it's very clear that the engagement is about helping someone setting them on their path for that change. So it can be a combination of, the organization has agreed to pay for a certain number of hours, right? That's often where it comes. Who's paying for it often kind of dictates that. Sometimes I try and encourage organizations and leaders to think about it. Let's say a bunch of hours. Can you get your organization to pay for a bunch of hours? Say it's 18 hours. And then between me and the coachee, we get to decide how to use that. They get to decide how to use that. I would always say you want a little bit more sessions up front. Let's get to know each other. Let's really establish what it is that you're looking to do. And then as time goes on, you might space those sessions out in order that they can go off and practice and really try and embed some of the things that you're doing. So I think actually in saying all of that, you said about your question there about, is it led by them? As much as it possibly can, I want the coachee to co-create that and to lead what they need in it. And the only time that I sometimes might share something with that is, I only need to see you every 3 months, but I really want to make a big change. It's probably not going to happen if that way. So yeah, sometimes I can share some wisdom about, how to structure that.
Yeah, definitely a real meaningful change. And the shifts do take time for them to happen. Do you also happen to work with, if you've ever needed their teams or coach their teams? Is there an offer like that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have clients where I've done that a lot. I've worked, there's been a very sort of team-centered piece, and I've coached some of the individuals within that team. So, in terms of splitting my time, I, one-on-one coaching is a hugely important piece of what I do, but it isn't the only thing I do. Mm-hmm. And that I love team coaching, and I love being more involved in those sort of team dynamics as well. And sometimes it's really just helpful to see the leader in action, right? Because inside of a coaching room, you have what they tell you, and that's what you have to work with it. Now, often I might do something like a 360 ahead so that you can get some information or some data to work with, or engage with their manager as part of that onboarding process for coaching. And nothing beats seeing them in action sometimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, This question is more for any other coach out there that is trying to do the same things, trying to grow their coaching business, trying to serve leaders. And in terms of like marketing and marketing channels, what has worked really well for you these past years?
Yeah, so I think it's probably not my best area, Rexhen. It's funny when you start a business and you go, oh, there's no IT person, there's no marketing person, there's no accountant. I need to work all of these things out for myself. And I think, to be honest, I've been really fortunate this last period where it's been a lot of referrals. So it's, someone has worked with me in one organization, they moved to a new organization, or they've recommended me, or I worked with one leader for 8 years. I've coached her on and off, but then she would call me in to coach team members or come in and do a team facilitation. So there's been those sort of ongoing relationships, which, to be honest, I absolutely love, because you get to see some of that change in action. So yeah, I think I feel like the world has shifted a bit though, and it's changing. And I think marketing is something that I need to perhaps get a little sharper on. But I would say the best thing is actually being in touch with those people who have worked with you, and that you can ask them perhaps for referrals.
Do you have have you thought of a system for how you do that? How you constantly stay, maybe fresh up the conversation, or like make sure that they see, oh, I'm still here? Because after you've worked with them and it's done, it's just like they don't have you at top of their mind. Even if they wanted to refer someone to you, they just don't think about it because they're just not thinking about you at that moment. They're just like going about their day.
Yes.
Just get into their attention again.
Yeah. I just get in touch with them. And do I have a system? I'm trying to make a system. I'm not a very good system person. I love the idea of them, and I've definitely set many up over the years. And I think that's one thing I would say to any budding coaches is there are so many ways of doing things out there, but do they fit with the way that you work? Mm-hmm. I'd say I'm quite a natural networker. It's something I enjoy. I've had to be more intentional about it since COVID. Right. I think pre-COVID that it was easy to go, oh, I'm in town, let's have a coffee, or I'm passing your office, let me drop in, or we happen to be at the same events, or, or there's more activity that makes you go, yes, I know that person would love it, and I'd get in touch with them. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely shifted since COVID, and I definitely have to be a bit more intentional about that. But I find it's hugely rewarding to just get in touch with people and see how they're doing. And with I don't go into that going, I must ask them for a referral. And I'm sure there are some marketing people out there who tell me I absolutely should be doing that. It's more of a genuine interest and curiosity, and a feeling that, ultimately that will bring some fruit down the line. And it certainly has to date.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. I like the authentic approach there. So right now with your coaching business, is there a specific, looking into the future for the next 1 to 3 years, do you have any specific goals that you're working towards?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of pieces in there. One is looking to collaborate with other people, and I've got some sort of early stage relationships going on there. I think some team transformation work, particularly where there has been a lot of dysfunction, or there can be a lot of trauma in organizations. It's really great to be able to facilitate with someone else and support a deeper level of change. And that's a kind of particular interest, or an edge I'm pushing into, is really wanting to work with teams who are, at a more, stressed state. And I think that kind of marries my experience in HR, to be honest, is seeing some of those teams and then sort of having the other skills to kind of bring in and support them. I think on a personal coaching level, I studied with the Strozzi Institute in America a few years ago, and would like to bring more into my practice somatic coaching. I tend to, it shows up, I'd say, unintentionally, as in when there are clients who are open to it, I may bring some of it in, but I think I would like to be actively, people who are interested in somatic coaching and following that as a modality. I'd like to be tapping into that a little bit more.
When thinking about investments that you've done as a coach in your coaching business or in yourself, what have been some investments that you are actually really proud of that you made those investments?
Yeah. So therapy would be number one. Is not only for coaches but for leaders too. I think when you it's a responsibility, right, to be in the coach seat and to be sort of really clear on what's your stuff and what's coming up for you, and to work through some of that. I think is really important. Alongside that is supervision. Like without supervision, there is no practice where you're not reflecting, right? And supervision really allows for that. And I think in terms of a return with that, I get unstuck with clients. I, have been able to sort of push the edges of what I'm doing and my work really sort of through supervision. And I say the other investments, I walk the talk, right? I love learning, despite the sort of perhaps false start at school. What I discovered actually once I got into learning and development was like, oh, people learn in different ways. And actually there is so much out there that I want to learn. And it's important for me for my own sort of nourishment, but also so that what I'm working with clients is current, up to date, that sort of thing. So I think the investment in my study at the Strozzi Institute it took me a while to get there. And yeah, I've been really pleased with that. Even if that's about how I have changed as a leader, how I've changed as a coach, even when I'm not using it specifically, the impact that that's had on me and life generally, right, including my business, has been huge.
So right now, thinking also about your goals that you're working towards, what would you say is a challenge that you're trying to solve for next in your coaching business? Where do you see kind of like the bottleneck right now?
Yeah, good question. I mean, marketing might be one of them, Rexhen, because I definitely need to think about sort of new ways for that. Mm-hmm. And one of the blockers has been, I have been paying for my website domain for about 7 years. And I've promised myself this year that is going to get done. And whilst I'm not sure that it would bring lots of clients to you, I think it's a good sort of credibility thing to have, and also helps you to think through, who am I? What am I offering to the world? And, who are my ideal clients? So it's been a good kind of process in doing that.
There's many things like that oftentimes don't bring clients in, or let's say clients might not really care as much about. From our research last year, one of the things was certifications. It just turned out that certifications were something that coaches were doing, but the clients really were not aware of what these certifications were, and they didn't really look for them, or they wouldn't know what that type of certification is, or certain titles that you put on your profile and things like that. They don't really make a difference, but you're paying a lot of money for these certifications. So they've turned out to be an investment that really didn't yield as much return on that investment.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And certainly from individual clients, I know from working in certain organizations that when looking for coaches, that was super important for us. And we really wanted to know, do you know what? It wasn't the certification per se. It's about knowing that there is rigor, that you are signing up to something that has structure, has ethics. I think that, because I've definitely met coaches where there's no accreditation, there's perhaps no supervision. I've even met coaches who've never had coaching themselves. And, that for me is a real challenge. And I have a really strong, firm belief in that whilst we're not a regulated industry, we in a position that means we need to be really responsible about the way that we're working. And I think we need to have sort of rigor in our practice. So yeah, I can see that the end coachee probably doesn't really get what that's related to, and that therefore that it may feel like it doesn't bring back on a return. And I would still challenge that somewhere in there, you need to be able to demonstrate that you actually have the skills to be sat in that seat. Yeah.
But is there any advice you'd like to give to other coaches who are looking to scale their impact?
Well, a little bit connected to that last piece is having rigor in your practice, and making sure that you're super clear on what it is that you can offer and what is not within your bounds, right? And those are the things that you can learn through accreditations, training, supervision relationships, is really knowing your own boundaries in there, and when actually it's something that's outside of your scope. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really important piece in terms of providing that. And The other thing I would say is if you're looking to start out in it is find a community, find a tribe. And that's what you can often get through, be it accreditation or be it your training circles. That's a good place to start in terms of other fellow coaches. It can be quite lonely when you're doing it by yourself. And so having a community that you can go to and say, hey, is this normal? Or what would you do about, has anyone had this problem? What would you do about this? I think is super important. And that's where I've definitely found, because there's highs and lows, right? I celebrated 10 years of being an independent consultant last week, and there's been a lot of highs and lows in that. And my community is the one that has been able to really support me through that times.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maddie. Thank you for coming to the podcast. For anyone who wants to connect with you or reach out to you,
be on LinkedIn, and you'll find out there when I announce that I've actually finally sorted out my website.
Okay, cool. So in that case, just use the LinkedIn. Website's not ready. Maybe this pushes you to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maddie. It was lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was really great to meet you, and thanks for the great questions.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.